Hello, welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me. In my series Freemasonry and Satanism, a continuation of this book, America's Secret Establishment. An introduction to the Order of the Skull and Bones. And this is what you call a death head. These are the people like John Kerry and George Bush and many others who wind up being our presidents and world leaders and CEOs, and one of their symbols is the death head. Skull and bones. So I think I'm going to embark on a new topic, an old topic to some people, but like James and Suzanne Poole in their book, Who Financed Hitler, we're going to find out that the banksters, the people who come from the skull and bones, generally speaking, which seems to be a subsidiary of the Illuminati, a sister-brother party to the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and all the other lodges, temples, and associations involved in Luciferic worship, as crazy as that sounds, Satanism, sacrificing people, called the Mystery School of Babylon. Babylon means the gateway to the gods, and apparently in ancient times the monuments and where these cultures originated or had some major headquarters were of course in Egypt, and the pyramids and the Sphinx, and north of Jerusalem in Lebanon with the Temple of Baalbek, which apparently they're rebuilding or making some imitation monuments of the same size, replicas, and they're going to install them in New York and London, temples to the satanic Baal, the demon god. And apparently they're going to be doing this all over the world, which interestingly enough seems to be part of the New World Order, New Age, where they want to destroy Christianity and other religions and have a one world order and a one world government and one world money, one world religion. Pretty scary stuff if you think about it. Microchipping everybody. Some dreadful days ahead if all that's prophesied happens. But what I'm looking at is books that were written on these subjects, and this one, of course, was written in 1986 by Antony Sutton, a well-respected author. So why don't I just get to it? Brown Brothers Harriman. That's a company people should remember. George Bush Sr. worked for them, got his start there. So Knight Woolley, the Order 17, was with Guarantee Trust from 1919 to 1920, a Harriman company from 1927 and 1931, then Brown Brothers Harriman from 1933 to the present time. So these big banks, Guarantee Trust, Chase, and all that, seem to have CEOs and leaderships that come from the skull and bones. As we know, so does presidents, senators, secretary of states, ambassadors, lots of people in high places. Frank Shepard, Order 17, also joined Guarantee Trust in 1919. Remember, these Guarantee Trust and other organizations like Harriman Company or Brown Brothers Harriman, they do deals and loan money and are involved in preparations for war all over the world, causing wars between countries, part of the Hegelian dialectic. Whoever's orchestrating this little world fiascos, sinister activities, control both sides of the conflict, which is called the Hegelian dialectic, like getting Germany and Russia to fight each other, and they were both being financed by Guarantee Trust, whose members come from the Skull and Bones. So Frank Shepard, vice president from 1920 to 1934, the period concerned with the development of both the Soviet Russia and Hitler's Nazi Party. From 1934 onwards, Shepard was with Bankers Trust Company, a member of the Morgan Group of banks. Avery Sedgwick James, Order 17, Skull and Bones Order, was a partner in Brown Brothers Harriman. So anyways, Antony Sutton goes through great lengths to show that there is a sequence of leadership in these organizations that come from the Skull and Bones, the order. Over in Europe, they were called the group, and different countries had different organizations, subsidiaries again, of the Illuminati, which basically, to me, is a sister organization like witchcraft. The occult, Rosicrucian, Kabbalah, Hollywood. Crazy? Seems like Donald Trump was maybe a high priest in the Freemasons. If you look at his condo in New York City, look it up on the computer, watch a video. And Hillary, according to one of the guys there, I'll think of his name, she was skipping out on weekends to Las Vegas to attend witches' covens conventions. I just had to pause the video to go look it up. Larry Nichols was apparently the enforcer, the handler for Bill Clinton during his governorship and probably his presidency. The guy who has to do some crazy things, maybe even kill people. And apparently Larry Nichols has admitted to doing some strange things. But he has interviews with Alex Jones and Lisa Haven that says that Hillary has some mental issues and apparently belongs to a witch's coven or involved in witchcraft. Which is also, as Newt Gingrich said about Donald Trump, which I think was a lie, that he couldn't be president because he wasn't initiated. Again, initiated is part of the initiation, or secret vows and oaths and training, learning about things in the Freemasons and Rosicrucians and other organizations that adhere to the Mystery School of Babylon. So moving on here. The Order's front man, Matthew Brush. From World War I until well into 1930s, the Order's front man in both Guarantee Trust and Brown Brothers Harriman was Matthew Brush. Brush was not Yale, nor a member of the Order, but through an accidental meeting in 1890s, his talents were used by the Order. Brush became a Knight Templar, a 32nd degree Mason, and a Shriner, so he was certainly a Freemason, but not so far as we can trace, more closely linked to the power center. So the key to getting positions of power and in high places and organizations and rich in wealth is once they're convinced you're not a good person, somebody with ethics and morals who will expose them for what they are. They usually have something on people. Franklin McVeigh was a member of the Order 62 and later Secretary of the Treasury, 1909-1913, under President William Taft, the Order 78. So as we're going to see, these people continuously wind up in positions of power. McVeigh himself, as distinct from Brush, is a little difficult to classify. In 1913, McVeigh left the Treasury and resigned as trustee of the University of Chicago. By 1919, he had become delinquent in his fees to the Russell Trust. Russell's one of the bloodlines of the Illuminati, as mentioned in Fritz Springmeier's book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Like Rothschilds, Rockefeller, and DuPont, and many other names, including Kennedy. We have a copy of the Dunning Notice sent to McVeigh by Otto Bernard of the Order 76, President of New York Life. There you go, another person from the Order, President of New York Life. And Treasurer for the Order in 1919. The notice asked McVeigh to pay up his dues. The purpose of this memorandum has been to demonstrate control of two banking houses by members of the Order, Skull and Bones. Both Guarantee Trust and Brown Brothers Harriman can truly be said to have been dominated and substantially owned by individuals identified as members. Now, let's examine the evidence of these two banking firms have been vehicles for creation of war and revolution. All right. Memorandum number 3, thesis. The Order creates the Soviet Union. Now, I do these book reviews, as I've said many times, because people have asked me, who is behind all this, Rick? And even if we watch videos or we listen to people, we're not sure. So I thought maybe I would give it a little bit more credibility by reading books by famous authors over the past 100 years and even further. And highlighting stuff that I have read, reading from the book, citing the page sometimes and all that. So, I guess, so a normal person with a normal brain should come to similar conclusions. Alright, the Order creates the Soviet Union. In an earlier book published in 1974, we presented major evidence of Wall Street assistance to the Bolshevik Revolution. So in one of Antony Sutton's previous books, 1974, this is 1986, he researched major evidence of Wall Street, which I've said many times, assistance in the Bolshevik Revolution. And this is a very important thing that a lot of people are not aware about. But apparently, after World War I, or near the end of World War I, when Russia was weakened, some conspirators from Wall Street, from New York City, Jewish mostly, or members of the Illuminati, Freemasons, or other Mystery School of Babylon people, into the Luciferian satanic religion. As per the Bible and a lot of other prophecy, trying to destroy Christianity and bring about a return to the Golden Age. So anyways, they sent a bunch of people to Russia through Germany, and it's a pretty big thing. They were trained and financed, and they were able to abduct the Tsar, the leader of the Russians, and his family, and take them to a remote house, and then later brought them out of the where they were locked up and said there needed to be a group photo, and then they were probably machine gunned to death. Children, wives, and the Tsar family, the elites in Russia. In 1917, World War I was from 1914 to 1916, and the Federal Reserve was created while Congress and everybody else was on Christmas vacation under the control or sway of President Woodrow Wilson, with some people down on Senator Hyde and some other people, an interesting story to go look up, on Jekyll Island. Over the Christmas holiday, they took control of America's money supply, and hence, as anybody can imagine, they took control of the United States, using our own money supply to bribe our own politicians, and obviously they crashed the system 7, 8, 9 times since then, sweeping all the money from all the people. When people couldn't pay their bills, these elitists from the Mystery School of Babylon were buying up everything on pennies on the dollar over and over and over, and orchestrating World War I, World War II, and trying to build the United States empire. And if you look at old maps, you'll see that it used to be the Empire of Germany, the Russian Empire, the UK, the English Empire, French Empire, Spanish Empire, all these Portuguese Empire, Austrian Empire. So for the past couple hundred years, 500 years, 1,000 years, these people were battling each other for domination over the planet. And it wasn't the citizenry of any of these countries. They were the pawns and the ones who were deceived, like today. So anyways, they had control of our Federal Reserve, and they've been using America's money to build this world empire. And as Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said, don't worry about America, we control America. And Benjamin Netanyahu said they're going to destroy America. So I don't think you need more evidence, but I'm going to continue reading in this book, and we'll have the evidence. So in an earlier book, Antony Sutton presented in 1974 major evidence of Wall Street assistance to the Bolshevik Revolution, which, by the way, after they killed the Tsar and took over the country, and the United States supplied it military assistance to protect the train lines and other things, and the banks from Wall Street provided money, they proceeded to slaughter up to, some say, you can look this up, 100 million Christians and other good people, destroy the Christian churches, but not the Jewish temples or killing the Jewish people. That says it all right there. But if you talk about this, they'll scream at you and call you an anti-Semite. And if you really become a force that exposes the Zionist Jewish program for world domination, along with others, they have assassins they'll send out to kill you. There's plenty of evidence of that. This assistance from Wall Street was mainly cash, guns, and ammunition, and diplomatic support in London and Washington, D.C. Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution also introduced the concept which Quigley described, i.e., that Morgan and other financial interests financed and influenced all parties from left to right in the political spectrum. So they controlled the Democrats, they controlled the Republicans. For these people, the people from the Skull and Bones and the Illuminati, etc., Mystery School of Babylon, they didn't really care who wins, and they were playing we the people in the United States off against one another, telling the poor people that if they voted for a Democrat, then they would get more social benefits, pay increases, etc. And then when the wealthy and the other people, they would use propaganda in the news saying the poor people were leeches off of society, and that they needed to vote for a Republican to strengthen America. And so it's all one big fake battle, propaganda, called the Hegelian dialectic, with a synthesis, a planned end, the end game, a paradigm shift in our reality of a new world order where all the citizens will be microchipped and slaves to these elitists. That's the end goal. And we've gone over books in my videos, Bloody Zion, Professor Higgins, books on the Jewish utopia, and so many more. The evidence just keeps on showing up no matter which well-respected author I read from. Some of the books, 50%, are deceptions and propaganda trying to convince us of a big lie, and the other 50% of the books are trying to expose the lie. And the authors have usually, like even this one, their books were not published by major publishing companies. They had to go find some remote publisher who had the will to publish it. The memorandum continues the story, but now links the order to the earlier evidence of Wall Street involvement. On the following pages, we reproduce a map of the Wall Street area and a list of firms connected with the Bolshevik Revolution and financing of Hitler located in this area. We can now identify the influence, in fact, the dominant influence of the order in these firms. I'm not reading everything, but highlighted portions. The Bankers Club, where Wall Street bankers met for lunch, was at the very top of the building. 120 Broadway, 1915. These people were serious. So the Bankers Club, where the Wall Street bankers met for lunch, was at the very top of the building. It was in this plush club that plans were laid by William Bryce Thompson for the Wall Street participation in the 1917 Russian Revolution. Guarantee Securities was in 120 Broadway, that building I just showed you, while Guarantee Trust was next door at 140 Broadway. The building can be seen to the left of 120. The order pushes for assistance to the Soviet Army. Fortunately, we have a copy of the memorandum written by a member of the order, summarizing intentions for the 1917 Bolshevik revolutions. The memorandum was written by Thomas Thatcher, the Skull and Bones 04, a partner in the Wall Street law firm of Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett. Thatcher's address was 120 Broadway. Today, this law firm, now in Battery Plaza, has the largest building on Wall Street and has former Secretary of State Cyrus Vance, another Yale fraternity like the Skull and Bones, was a member of the Scroll and Key as a partner. The Thatcher Memorandum not only urges recognitions of the barely surviving Soviet government, in early 1918 controlled only a very small portion of Russia. So when they did kill the Tsar and his family, they only controlled a small portion of Russia. Russia's a huge country. But also military assistance for the Soviet army and intervention to keep the Japanese out of Siberia until the Bolsheviks could take over. So Wall Street was using money, and as we'll find out, American troops, probably all other resources, to help ensure the success of the Bolshevik Revolution, where they killed 100 million Christians and other good people, destroyed the Christian churches, and I keep saying this for a point. It's 100 million. 25 million admitted in a major Israeli newspaper. Remember, the Bolsheviks were Jewish folks, aimed at world domination. So 25 million admitted to 100 million likely, according to documents I have. We don't hear anything about that. But we hear about the 6 million Jewish folks in Germany. So I'm just weighing these two, 6 million here and 100 million here, we hear nothing about. And since World War II, all we ever hear about is the 6 million Jews, which a lot of people believe there weren't just Jews. A lot of people were rounded up to be slaves in the war factories. Even in the United States, they rounded up the Japanese people and put them in the camps. And they had gas chambers, which I suspect was probably like we use gas chambers for here in the United States now, cremation when people die, for health reasons. So I think some of the truth has been distorted. So anyways, these people apparently had a lot of money and a lot of power. And you can see Wall Street here, a little map of it, and a list of the companies involved with the order back at that time in 1917. I can't see too well because of the reflection here. Alright, I took a look at the video. You could see the map. But anyways, there on Broadway, there was Edward Harriman before his death at 120. W.A. Harriman Company at 59 Broadway. American International Corporation at 120 Broadway. J.P. Morgan at 23 Wall. Federal Reserve Bank of New York at 120 Broadway. Bankers Club, 120 Broadway, at the top floor. The Bankers Club. Thomas Thatcher, Simpson, the law firm, 120 Broadway. William Boyce Thompson, 14 Wall. 120 Broadway was Guggenheim Exploration. 15 Broadway was Stenson, Jennings, and Russell. 120 Broadway was the C.A.K. Martins and Weinberg and Posner, the first Soviet ambassador. 110 West and 40th Street was the Soviet Bureau. 60 Broadway was Amos Pynchot's office. 120 Broadway, Stone and Webster. 120 Broadway, Western General Electric. 120 Broadway, Sinclair Golf Group. 140 Broadway, Guarantee Trust Company. And 233 Broadway, Anglo-Russian Chamber of Commerce. So the things that were going on back in 1917, crazy as it seems, we have a what do you call it? This all happened in 1917, and this is going to be 2017 coming up. What'll happen in 2017? Celebrating 100 years. Alright, individual members of the order at 120 Broadway. George Adams of the order, 04. Alan Ames of the order, 18. Philip Dodge, 07. Here are the main sections from the Thatcher Memorandum. First of all, the Allies should discourage Japanese intervention in Siberia. In the second place, the fullest assistance should be given to the Soviet government in its efforts to organize a volunteer revolutionary army. Thirdly, the Allied governments should give their moral support to the Russian people in their efforts to work out their own political systems free from the domination of any power. Now, I might add here, give their moral support to the Russian people in their efforts to work out their own political systems free from the domination of any foreign power. Meanwhile, back at the ranch here in the United States, under the control of the Illuminati, and as Prime Minister of Israel said, that they control America, we're, the United States, building its empire with almost 200 bases all over the world, spending $460 billion a year, are working to control political systems worldwide, like the overthrow of Egypt, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, now Syria, the Ukraine, so many others, Panama invasions, Grenada, and like John Perkins in his book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, they were sending people around to see presidents and leaders of countries all over the world, encouraging them to borrow money so that they could increase their gross national product, make a lot of money. When they knew it was a lie, what they were looking for in the international court were these countries to default on their loans so they could be integrated into the control of the United Nations and the IMF, International Monetary Fund, Federal Reserve, and other things, so the countries would go bankrupt, which apparently is something they did in 1888 or something in the United States. And then they formed a new corporation, the United States Incorporated, which is now a corporation instead of under the Constitution of the United States. Look it up, don't believe me. And hence we have the gold fringe on the American flag, which means we're under some kind of maritime law, corporate law, versus the Constitution of the United States. Again, don't believe me, look it up. Grand deceptions. Moving on, there will be opportunity for peaceful commercial penetration by German agencies in Russia. So long as there is no open break, it will probably be impossible to entirely prevent such commerce. Steps should therefore be taken to impede, so far as possible, the transport of grain and raw materials to Germany from Russia. So it's funny, you know, they want to leave Russia alone when they sent in these trained Jewish Bolsheviks to kill the Tsar and take over the country. And they're using Wall Street in the United States to make sure nobody else interferes with this new country, which, as we all know, became a communist country. And apparently, there's another book called National Suicide, Military Aid to the Soviet Union. And apparently the greater plan is, and it's in this book and other books, is they plan on integrating communist Russia with communist USA if they can pull off the New World Order and continue to deceive everybody. It was, in fact, a hidden policy adopted at the highest levels in absolute secrecy by the United States and to some extent, by the group. The group is a order like the Skull and Bones at Yale. In Britain and England, they have something called the group. Especially Milner in Great Britain. When President Woodrow Wilson sent U.S. troops to hold the Trans-Siberian Railroad, secret instructions were given by Woodrow Wilson in person to General William Graves. American intervention had little to do with anti-Bolshevik activity. So, in essence, Wall Street supported the transformation of Russia into a communist entity. Now, think about that. Later on, they started shipping all the jobs from the United States to China, another assisted communist entity that was created by, as you'll find out in this book, by also U.S. Wall Street support. So they're lying to we the people in the United States, and they had a hand in creating the two communist countries who they said were our enemies. So grateful were the Soviets for American assistance in the revolution in 1920. When the last American troops left Vladivostok, the Bolsheviks gave them a friendly farewell. Reported in the New York Times, February 15, 1920. So apparently here's a copy of the advertisement. Red flags fly on every government building, many business houses and homes. There is a pronounced pro-American feeling evident. So they were celebrating the Americans helping to create communist Russia. Remember we had the Cold War? Calling the Americans real friends who are at a critical time saves this present movement. So we can say that it wasn't 99% of the American people who were kept out of the loop. All this stuff was done in secret by the 1% who control our country. Normally, reports inconsistent with the establishment line are choked. So what they tell the people and what they do is two different things. Either by wire services or by the rewrite desk at large newspapers. Small papers, unfortunately, follow the New York Times. This is one report that got through intact. So there was an article in the New York Times about the Russians celebrating and thanking the troops as they leave Russia for their support. This is important stuff. In fact, the United States took over and held the Siberian Railroad until the Soviets, that would be the Bolsheviks, not the 99% of the Soviet citizens, or certainly the Tsar and his family, until the Soviets gained, they should say the Bolshevik Jews, now called Soviets, gained sufficient power to take over. Both British and French military missions, France and Britain, in Siberia recorded the extraordinary actions of the United States Army, but neither mission made much headway with its own government. So far as aiding the Soviet army is concerned, there are State Department records that show guns and ammunition were shipped to the Bolsheviks. So the Russian Revolution, which is now the communist country, and apparently the threat to the United States in 2016, today, there are threats of nuclear war, and with China, were all created by these people from Wall Street and our controlled politicians. And apparently, according to Albert Pike in Morals and Dogma, there will be a third war. And apparently they plan on nuking the United States and doing something, declaring martial law. They have FEMA camps. The government's bought 460 million hollow point bullets. They were running Jade Helm 15 last year, dispersing troops and equipment all over the United States. A lot of it with big UN numbers on white vehicles, United Nations. So is there a plan? We're reading back here there was a plan. And there's plenty of evidence in my videos that there's a plan. But if you say there's a plan, they're going to call you a conspiracy theorist. And if you talk about the Bolshevik Revolution, you're an anti-Semite. So in times of like these, truth is treason. Truth could get you arrested, a drone, assassinated, ruined, fired. And in 1919, while Trotsky was making anti-American speeches in public, he was also asking Ambassador Francis for American military inspection teams to train the new Soviet army. So on TV, or newspapers, however they were doing it back in 1919, I don't think they had TV back then, Trotsky was making anti-American speeches in public while he was asking Ambassador Francis for American military inspection teams to train the new Soviet army. And remember, they proceeded to kill 100 million Soviets, Christians and other good people, destroy the Christian churches and all that. And a lot of those deaths were caused by starvation, FYI. Which seems that what they're going to do in the United States when they declare martial law. If you've ever been in an area where they had a hurricane or a major storm, the grocery shelves are usually emptied in 3 days, 2 days. So if they declare martial law, there will not be any semi-tractor trucks or trains delivering goods to your grocery store. That could be part of the plan, and people will start dying and fighting each other days after. Like George Bush Sr. said, out of chaos and anarchy will come the New World War. Moving on here, the order pushes for the Soviets in the United States. However, it was in Washington and London that the order really aided the Soviets. The order succeeded not only in preventing military actions against the Bolsheviks, but to so muddy the policy waters. This is the Skull and Bones order involved in our government and corporations and banking system. They were intervening to muddy the policy waters that much needed vital raw materials and goods, ultimately even loans, were able to flow from the United States to the Soviets in spite of a legal ban. So these elitists from the Skull and Bones, remember George Bush was from the Skull and Bones, he was president during 9/11, and his father was president when they did the first invasion of Iraq. Woodrow Wilson, all these presidents were from the order or some other organization like Freemasons. And they've been conspiring against their own people in the United States, according to my research. The following documents illustrate how members of the order were able to encourage Soviet ambitions in the United States. So the Skull and Bones were encouraging Soviet activities in the United States, while the Department of Justice was deporting so-called Reds to Russia. A much more potent force was at work within the U.S. government to keep a fledgling Soviet Union intact. So there's some letters here. I'm only reading my highlighted portions. I have read everything here. November 22, 1918. Mr. Novnotera, Finnish Information Bureau, 299 Broadway City. Dear Mr. Notavera, let me thank you very kindly for the letter November 1st. I apologize for not answering sooner. I have read your bulletin on the barrage of lies, and I am, needless to say, heartily sympathetic with your views of the situation and with the work you are doing. One of the most sinister things at present is the fact that governments are going into the advertising business. They are organized so that they can make or wreck movements. Sincerely yours, Amos Pitchett. And I have been noticing the headlines these days in the news, and two things are popping up almost every day. You got to pay attention. One is the gay agenda, in particular that situation in Georgia. And now CEOs and Disney and so many people are going to pull their money and funds out of Georgia if the governor signs that bill that only men can use men's bathrooms and women can use women's bathrooms, or preachers can say no to marrying gay people. Why are all these elitists, obviously from the order or sister organizations, part of the secret cabal vying for a new world order, promoting the gay agenda so much? And the second one I'm noticing, and I am saving these and printing them out, is the insane climate change propaganda, that everything is going to crash and burn and we can't save the planet. And then they call global warming or global cooling, but climate change. And I'm thinking, when has the climate not changed? You can look at graphs from core samples that you can look up on the internet, and it's up and down for the 4,000 years. No significant difference today. So as the Secretary of the United Nations said, she said that it's really not about global warming, it's about destroying capitalism. So what they really want to do is destroy countries and states and anywhere in the world where people can have the opportunity to create some wealth and independence, because generally speaking they think we're inferior, profane, cattle, or as H.G. Wells says, animals not to be trusted. So they're lying thieves, these people, trying to suppress the rest of us and rip us off. And they're causing conflicts, the Hegelian dialectic, to have two parties destroy each other, like Shiites and Sunnis, Republicans and Democrats, strays and gays and black and whites and old and young and Mexicans and immigration. And they're really good at that, and they own the newspapers and media, so they can publish these articles, and zombie-like citizens will just be glued to the TV and believe what they are seeing and hearing. So in this book, page 144 and 145, Antony Sutton has some of the evidence letters here to support his claims to his immaterial. Alright, page 146, reading on. The above letter is from Amos Pitchett, Order 97. His brother, conservationalist Guilford Pitchett, Order 89, was also a member. Amos Pitchett was a founder of the American Civil Liberties Union. They make these names sound good. American Civil Liberties Union. They create these organizations with nice sounding names. How can you argue with the American Civil Liberties Union? So anyways, one of the members of the order was the founder of the Civil Liberties Union, and active in aiding the Soviets during the early days of the Bolshevik Revolution. So the guy who was aiding the creation of communism in the world, part of the Hegelian dialectic right now, where the free world is going to fight the communist world, it's all going to be a facade, of course. People are not going to know the truth, and the outcome will be a World War III, and then there will be no freedom after that. People will not like it. There will be no encouraging of transgenderism then, and probably gay people will be beheaded. But in the meantime, they will use them as fools to bring about their taking over the world. It's like if the blacks and whites get in a fight in the United States, riot and revolution, it will have been orchestrated, and it has nothing to do with helping the blacks or helping the whites. They want to bring about chaos and anarchy so that they can come in and police the situation and police the whole world. But they need the people's cooperation to do that. Am I making myself clear? Where was Notera? This name was an alias for Alexander Neuberg, a Soviet representative in the United States. The first Soviet ambassador and formerly a vice president of Weinberg and Posner, the New York office of Weinberg and Posner was at 120 Broadway. So these Skull and Bones member, one of them is the first Soviet ambassador. Neuberg's assistant was Kenneth Durant, an American newspaperman, later TASS, correspondent in the United States, and one-time aide to Colonel Edward House, mystery man in the Woodrow Wilson administration, director of the commercial department in the Soviet Bureau was Comrade Evans Clark. Clark later became executive director of the influential 20th Century Foundation. I'm thinking 20th Century Fox or whatever movie producers. And at 20th Century Foundation we find a member of the order. In the case of Charles Phelps Taft of the Order 18, nephew of President and Chief Justice William Howard Taft. So Antony Sutton is connecting a lot of dots here of all these people. How Evans Clark and the order working together at 20th Century Foundation had a significant role in the Hegelianization of the American education. Trade was vital for the survival of the Soviet Union. In 1919, all Russian factories and transportation were at a standstill. There were no raw materials and no skills available. For assistance, Evans Clark turned to the order, the Skull and Bones. On May 29, 1919, Amos Pitchett wrote fellow Skull and Bones member and strong Republican William Kant about raising the blockade against the Soviets. William Kant, the Order 87, was on the U.S. Tariff Commission and in turn wrote Senator Lenroot to request an interview for Professor Evans Clark. So there was a tariff commission, a U.S. tariff. So what you did is you charged a tax or a fee when people brought goods into the United States. And that protected us economically and financially. And we know the order is in control of the United States. And behind the order, the Skull and Bones, apparently it's these elitists and the Illuminati, kind of a witchcraft thing, which is also included in witchcraft, which are predominantly controlled at the top, higher up, by apparently the Zionist Jewish folks for thousands of years, like Rothschilds. It is what it is. So now with the, what my point is here, with the Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, the free trade agreement in America with Mexico and Canada, South America, the Pacific Free Trade Agreement, there will be no tariffs. And these other countries can, with slave labor, bring goods into the United States to compete with the American people and the American companies, which of course they can't compete. If you can make a fork in China for a penny and it costs 25 cents here in the United States, where is the company going to start manufacturing forks and everything else? So they want to bring the United States in line with the third world nations in communist control, instead of bringing the rest of the world up to freedom and prosperity. That does not bode well for the New World Order elitists who control the world and who are into some very sick, perverse activities. pedophilia, all kinds of sexual activity, sacrificing people, witchcraft and all that, worshiping Satan, Lucifer. It is what it is if you do your research. Symbols are everywhere. Alright, in brief, two members of the order, Pinchot and Kent, cooperated to push a known Bolshevik operator onto the unsuspecting senator. Neither member of the order advised Senator Lenroot about Clark's affiliation with the Soviet Bureau. So here's one of the letters. Comrade Clark has been a member of the Socialist Party since 1911 and has taken an active part in the labor movement in the United States. He has been instructor of politics in Princeton University and was one of the organizers of the Inter-College Gate Biologic Socialistic Society, in which was the first president. I can't read it because it's not quite clear, as you can see. So what I'm trying to say here, all this stuff was planned and is planned. The evidence is here. How the order controlled the early development of the Soviet Union. And here's a little chart. So Brown Brothers Harriman, A. Harriman and Company, was Averill Harriman, Roland Harriman, Averill James, Ray Morris, Prescott Bush, George Bush's daddy, Knight Woolley, Mordecai Seabury, Robert Levitt, and Stetson, Brown, Horde, Madden, and some other people, through the American International Corporation, and International Barnsdale Corporation, and the Georgian Magnanese Corporation. Alright, so here we are in 2016, and if you pay attention to some of the media news, mainstream and alternate, you can see that there is a threat of a nuclear war, World War III. It's the talk of the world right now. And China. So how did it all come about? And was it all planned like Albert Pike in his letter to Mazzini back in about 1885 or something? This whole thing, all planned. Page 149. How the order developed the stagnant Soviet Union. Between 1917 and 1921, the Soviets pushed their control of Russia into Siberia and the Caucasus. So they took over Moscow and they pushed eastward, Siberia and the Caucasus. Soviets maintained this was an The United States intervened in the Siberian along the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Histories of U.S. intervention by George Kennan and the Soviets maintained that this was an anti-Soviet intervention. So they're saying they were anti-Soviet, but they were helping the Bolshevik Jewish folks. In fact, it was nothing of the kind. The U.S. spread troops along the Siberian Railroad only to keep out the Japanese, not to keep out the Soviets. But this is yet another untold story, not in the textbooks. The immediate problem facing the Soviets was to restore silent Russian factories. They needed raw materials, technical skills, and working capital. The key to Russian reconstruction was the oil fields of the Caucasus. The Caucasus oil fields are a major segment of Russian natural resource wealth. In 1900, it was producing more crude oil than the United States, and in 1901, more than half of the total world crude output. The Caucasus oil fields survived revolution and intervention without major structural damage, and became a significant factor in the Soviet economic recovery. generating about 20% of all exports by value, the largest single source of foreign exchange. Getting tired of speaking, I think. Making mistakes. The Bolsheviks took over the Caucasus in 1920, 1921, but until 1923, oil field drilling almost ceased. And I'm only reading my highlighted portions. You get this book? Let's give credit where credit is due if you think this material is important. American capital is going to support us, the Soviets said. The American firm will provide the equipment, start drilling in the oil fields, and organize the technical production of oil with deep pumps. Massive imports of equipment came from the United States. The first international Barnsdall concession was signed in October 1921. It was followed in September by 1922 by 2 further agreements. The one comparatively bright spot in Russia is the petroleum industry, and this was due largely to the fact that a number of American workers have been brought into the oil fields to superintend their operations. The chairman of International Barnsdall Corporation was the Matthew C. Brush, whom we previously identified as the Skull and Bones frontman. Guarantee Trust, Lee, Higginson Company, and W.A. Harriman owned Barnsdall Corporation. The Guarantee Trust interest was represented by Eugene Stetson, also vice president of Guarantee Trust, whose son Eugene Stetson was initiated into the Skull and Bones in 1934. Now remember, if you saw my videos about the Blue Lodge Freemasonic Handbook, I think I made 12 2-hour videos, 24 hours. Went right through the rituals for the 3 degrees. And it all focuses on Jerusalem, King Solomon's temple, the Jews. And of course, not all Jews. I've got a lot of my information by Jews who are trying to warn the rest of us. Rabbi Marvin Antleman, his 2 books to eliminate the opate. Opate means belief in God. It always centers around, they want us to not believe in God and not believe in Jesus, and they want everybody to come to this new one-world religion of Satanism, Illuminati, return to the Golden Age where they sacrificed people to death. Henry Macau, Ph.D., Canadian author, Jewish guy, who wrote Illuminati, the cult that hijacked the world. But there were some Jewish people who turned from God to the dark angels, or the dark entities, demons, who were expelled from heaven, wherever that is. And they do their ceremonies. This is called witchcraft, Illuminati, sacrificing people, and apparently involves some kind of alternate DNA other than human entities on planet Earth. Been watching my videos, the evidence is there. That temple in Lebanon called Baalbek, with the largest stones ever cut from a quarry, moved uphill miles away, that we can't do today, was a temple to Baalbek, the demonic god. And they're now erecting these new Baalbek temples in the United States, in London, and presumably all over the world. There is something coming. I went over this in another book. There's that big temple in Dominican Republic. A gigantic church, built by the Catholic Church, I believe. But it's huge, like a gigantic rectangle. And on top is like a Mayan pyramid where they sacrificed people. And if you go inside, according to the descriptions I've read, there are long rows and just doors with cells with doors on them. So is there going to come this day when people from all over the world, Christians and other good people that are opposed to the New World Order, will be rounded up, put in those cells in the Dominican Republic, brought to the top of this huge building, you can look it up, and sacrificed? What bizarre reality is coming? I know a lot of people only focus on, if it's not bothering me right now, why should I care? The people in the Middle East have been being killed and displaced and destroyed and suffering for the last 20 years at least. Yes? No? And I just think if people don't care, that's going to come back to haunt them. We are our brother's keeper. We should treat other people as we want to be treated, according to Jesus. And when Moses went up to the mountain after he helped the Hebrews escape captivity in Egypt, and came back down the mountain with the 2 tablets. Number 6 was thou shalt not kill. Number 7 was thou shalt not commit adultery. Number 8, thou shalt not steal. Alright, moving on. The Soviets acquired modern mining and transportation facilities for their manganese deposits, acquired foreign exchange, and finally shattered American foreign policy concerning loans to the USSR in a series of business agreements with W.A. Harriman Company and Guarantee Trust. On July 12, 1925, a concession agreement was made between the W.A. Harriman Company of New York and the USSR for exploration of Chanatori magnesium deposits and extensive introduction of modern mining and transportation methods. So the 2 countries who are threatened to nuke the United States today in conflicts around the world, China and Russia, would not exist if the United States did not supply them with high technologies. And this was also at the behest of the Skull and Bones and other Mystery School of Babylon organizations, temples and lodges and associations, which are bent on a New World Order and destroying Christianity. So there is a sinister spiritual purpose behind all this, apparently. The chairman of Georgian Manganese Company, the Harriman operating company on the site in Russia, was none other than the Order's frontman, Matthew Brush. Here's a letter here from Secretary American Embassy, Roy Alberton. So Antony Sutton has his evidence and information. He did his research. Well-respected author. Moving on. The order too powerful for State Department to investigate. Where have we heard that before? 2008, where the banks were too big to fail. The banks are controlled by the order. While the order carried out its plans to develop Russia, the forerunner of communism, the State Department could do nothing. Its bureaucrats sat in Washington, D.C. like a bunch of mesmerized jackrabbits. Firstly, in the 1920s, loans to the Soviet Union were strictly against the United States law. Public and government sentiment in the United States was overwhelmingly against the Soviets. It would be the Bolshevik Jews who killed the Tsar and his family and proceeded to kill 100 million Christians and other good people, largely by starvations, the ones that they didn't behead or just shoot, bang. They stole the whole country, the Bolshevik Jewish people. And World War I, with the Balfour Agreement, they conspired to help Britain win a war they were losing against Germany if Britain promised to help annex the Palestinians' land to create the State of Israel, which is to be the seat of power, financially and religious, for the new one world religion and the one world order. All planned, I keep saying. It's in the books. With the death head. So public and government sentiment in the United States was overwhelmingly against the Soviets. Not least for widespread atrocities committed in the name of the revolution. They killed 100 million Christians and other good people. Remember, prior to World War I, the Jews were treated harshly in Russia. They had something called pogroms, special treatment to the Jews because of the problems the Jews were causing. Before World War I, the Jews fled to Germany and found a safe haven and grew in their culture and prosperity, wealth, and everything. They thought they had gone to heaven, the Jews in Germany. World War I now. But when Germany was winning the war, largely probably because of a lot of the Jewish influence in the growth of Germany, the Jews in New York conspired to turn traitor on Germany because they had an ulterior goal. They wanted the Palestinians' land for the state of Israel, and they saw a way to get it. These are the same New York people after World War I who sent the Jewish Bolsheviks into Russia to kill the Tsar and his family and take over almost a whole continent. Secondly, the Harriman Guarantee Syndicate, which reflected the order, did not inform the State Department of its plans. So behind the scenes, these people from the order, Skull and Bones, and other Illuminati subsidiaries, members of the Mystery School of Babylon, which is gateway to the gods, which apparently is some demonic cult. Like Henry Macau wrote in his book, PhD Jewish-Canadian author, Illuminati, the cult that hijacked the world. And what's behind this cult? Rabbi Marvin Entelman tells us who it is. It is these people who are into demonology. King Solomon's temple, they're trying to rebuild in Israel right now. King Solomon had a magic ring with a six-pointed star, like on the Israeli flag, which he could use to call forth demons, opened up some kind of interdimensional portal, and that's how he obtained his power. You can't make this stuff up. A lot of this is common knowledge to people who just look into it, read it in the Bible. Look in the symbols and the hieroglyphics. Isis, Osiris, Horus, the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. Averell Harriman, page 153, sneaked an illegal project past the U.S. government. If this is not irresponsible behavior, then nothing is. And this was the man who was later to become the U.S. ambassador to Russia. Anyways, Antony Sutton has more documents here, if you get this book, to back up his claims. All right, let me read a little more here. 156. Now we reach a truly extraordinary point. The U.S. government was not informed by the W.A. Harriman and Guarantee Trust that they intended to invest $4 million developing Soviet manganese deposits. Yet this was clearly illegal. So apparently the mafia, the Illuminati, has taken over the U.S. government, controls our politicians, and if anybody gets in the way, they'll probably get what John Kennedy got. The truly extraordinary point is that the U.S. government was not able to pursue an investigation. That's how powerful these people are. There are certain and very definite reasons why I consider it very unwise for the department to initiate any investigation with respect to the reported manganese concession. So one member of the order says we should not investigate these illegal activities. I defer to your judgment upon this, says Assistant Secretary of State Carr. The distinct impression is that some behind-the-scenes power was not to be challenged. And here's a copy of that letter. So even today, you really can't challenge these people. Moving on, page 159. The order makes its own laws. The order kept a hold on every non-governmental strategic position related to the Soviet Union. The Skull and Bones. Nothing appears to have escaped their attention. Now remember, behind the Skull and Bones, behind the Freemasons, behind the Illuminati, behind the Rosicrucians, behind the Bilderberger Group, behind the Bohemian Grove, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, Club of Rome, Bilderberger Groups, and so many more, the Gay Agenda, Agenda 21, the United Nations, most of the people who are elected as representatives and senators and presidents are controlled by these people. Behind that, apparently, are these cults of people, Sabbatins, Frankens, who are Jewish, who have turned from God and worship demonic beings, Satan, and they're trying to force this upon the rest of us. They have no compassion or mercy, and they think of the rest of us, like H.G. Wells says, animals not to be trusted. The Jews in the Talmud, and the bad Jews, call us goyim, means cattle, and the Freemasons and all the other lodges, Skull and Bones, call us profane. Just animals to be slaughtered and fleeced and robbed and killed and used and sacrificed. Children to be used for pedophilia, child abuse, sex, and all this other insane stuff. Promote prostitution, adultery, all this other stuff. Transgenderism, pansexual, you can have sex with anything. Some very sick, perverted entities. The chairman of its executive committee, the key post in the chamber, was held by Samuel Burton of the Skull and Bones, 1985, a vice president of Guarantee Trust, and formerly a member of the 1917 route mission to Russia. Out of New York City came these people trained and sent to Russia to kill the Tsar and his family and take over almost a whole continent and kill 100 million Christians and other good people. What date trading in Russia credits was prohibited in the United States by federal authorities? This means that the order was well aware in 1921 that credits to the USSR were illegal, and indeed not to be made legal until President Roosevelt took office in 1933. However, illegal or not, within 18 months of the Bertrand letter, Guarantee Trust established more than trading in Russian credits. Guarantee Trust made a joint banking agreement with the Soviets and installed a Guarantee Trust vice president, Max May, as director in charge of the foreign division of the Soviet bank, Bank. See document on page 157. In brief, while the U.S. public was being assured by the U.S. government that the Soviets were dastardly murderers, which the ones who took over the government were, not the Soviet people. So a lot of people have trouble getting and seeing who we're really talking about. So that the Soviets who had taken over the continent, the Bolshevik Jewish folks, were dastardly murderers, while Reds were being deported back to Russia by the Department of Justice, while every politician, almost without exception, was assuring the American public that the United States would have no relations with the Soviets. While this barrage of lies was aimed at a gullible public, behind the scenes, the Guarantee Trust Company was actually running a division of a Soviet bank. The American troops were being cheered by Soviet revolutionaries for helping to protect the revolutionaries. That, dear readers, is why government needs censorship. So the government needs censorship. They need to create hate laws and all this other stuff to shut us up. This is April 2nd, 2016. Watch what's coming in your near future, and if you understand this material, you'll understand why. That's why every 50 years after some events, that's why even 50 years after some events, it's almost impossible for independent researchers, not the bootlickers, to get key documents declassified. Here's another letter here. It says here, is not itself the Soviet government but a jurisdiction activity incorporated in November 1921 by edict of the Soviet government incapable of suing and being sued as an individual in the Soviet courts was Secretary of State, Washington, D.C. The State Bank of the USSR is not itself of a Soviet government, but a jurisdictional entity incorporated. So more evidence that the bank guarantee trust and the Skull and Bones people from the United States were behind supporting and growing communism in Russia. And then after that, of course, they did it in China and moved all the American jobs over there while deceiving the American people the whole time. What else is new under the sun? Page 161. The Order's Skull and Bones law firms, New York establishment law firms, several founded by members of the Order, have close links to banks and specifically those operational vehicles for revolution already cited. So the people controlling the banks, which are the Jewish folks, they even write books about how the Jews control Hollywood and much more, pawn shops, movie theaters, even took over the liquor production in the United States. Henry Ford wrote a lot of books. We'll be going over those again. And so there, with all that financial power and wealth, they were orchestrating all the destruction of countries all over the world, including, it seems here, Russia, where they killed the Tsar and his family, and many others, 100 million. And World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, Korean War, invasion of Panama, and so many activities, crashing the dollar in the United States 7, 8, 9 times so they can just buy up all the wealth on pennies on the dollar that hardworking families work so hard to obtain. About this time, Thatcher, who wrote the Order's statement on the Bolshevik Revolution, page 138, became friendly with both Felix Frankfurter and Raymond Robbins. According to extensive documentation in the Lask committee files, both Frankfurter and Robbins were of considerable assistance to the Soviets. I'm only reading the highlighted portions. There's a lot more here. Furthermore, readers of Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, another book, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, look it up, will recall that member Samuel Bertrand was on the route mission to Russia in 1917. So I think the route mission was to train and send people to Russia from New York to kill the Tsar and his family and take over the whole continent, Russia. And then it appears later on in this material, the United States and other people sent troops over there to protect all the assets, the trains and everything, to ensure the success of the Bolshevik Jews taking over Russia and killing all the Christians and destroying the churches by starvation. But they didn't destroy the Jewish temples. Moreover, Thomas Thatcher, Skull and Bones 04, was a member of the Red Cross mission with Alan Woodwell, son of Thomas Woodwell, Standard Oil treasurer, and a partner in another Wall Street law firm, Stetson, Jennings, and Russell. The links of this firm to the Order will be described in a later volume. Eugene Stetson, Jr., for example, is a member of the Skull and Bones 34. Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett represented the Soviet State Bank in the United States and was the vehicle used by the Order to inform State Department of activities that might otherwise be blocked by low-level bureaucrats following the government rulebook. For example, in 1927, Stimson, Thatcher, and Bartlett informed the U.S. government that the Soviets were in the process of substantially increasing deposits in the United States. They're putting their money, these Jewish Bolshevik revolutionaries, that they obtained by killing the Tsar and his family and taking over a whole country and killing hundreds of million people, 100 million people, or 60 million, 80 million, 90 million. So they're putting money in the United States banks. This increase was in preparation for the enormous outlays to be channeled to a few favored U.S. firms to build the Soviet first 5-year plan. So they had a 5-year plan how to gain a political stronghold here in the United States, too. The letter read closely indefinite. It puts words in the mouth of the State Department, i.e., this is what we are going to do, and in spite of the U.S. government. It seems to us there is no reason why the bank should not increase its deposits, notwithstanding our government has not recognized the USSR. A little more here and I'll end this video. We're going to have to probably do part 6 or something. Too much valuable information here. Russia. During the past 4 years, the government of the United States has maintained the position that it would be both futile and unwise to enter into relations with the Soviet government, so long as the Bolshevik leaders persist its aims and practices in the field of international relations, which preclude the possibility of establishing relations on the basis of accepted principles governing the intercourse between nations. It is the conviction of the government of the United States that the relationship, on a basis usually between friendly nations, cannot be established with a government entity which is the agency of a group who hold it as their mission to bring about the overthrow of the existing political, economic, and social order throughout the world, and who regulate their conduct towards other nations accordingly. Did you get that? The people running our country know what's planned, but they work for these people. They're afraid of these people, probably. China vows that they're going to overthrow the existing political and economic social order also, by the way. But again, they're another communist nation. But again, they're not entities under their own. They're controlled by these demonic mystery school of Babylon, Illuminati monsters. I don't know how else to describe these people, if they're people. Such conferences and discussions have been entirely fruitless. No state has been able to obtain the payment of debts contracted by Russia under preceding governments, or the indemnification of its citizens for confiscated property. Indeed, there is every reason to believe that the granting of recognition and the holding of discussions has served only to encourage the present rulers of Russia and China. I'm adding China because somebody wrote that here, the person who read this book before me. In their policy of repudiation and confiscation. So these people running this communist New World Order program plan on confiscating everything we have and reducing the population, killing off many of those they don't want, even here in the United States, like they're doing all over the Middle East. And many people are not going to see it coming. As well as in their hope that it is possible to establish a working basis accepted by other nations, whereby they can continue their war on the existing political and social order in other countries. So in 1986, Antony Sutton wrote this book. Smarter guy than I am, well-known author, researcher. Current developments demonstrate the continued persistence at Moscow of a dominating world revolutionary purpose and the practical manifestation of that purpose in such ways to render impossible the establishment of normal relations with the Soviet government. The present rulers of Russia, while seeking to direct the evolution of Russia along political, economic, and social lines in such manner as to make it an effective base of the world revolution, continue to carry on through the Communist International and other organizations with headquarters at Moscow within the borders of other nations, including the United States. So way back then in 1920s and 30s, they did have congressional hearings, and a lot of these communist infiltrators did admit to wanting to infiltrate American associations and religious organizations to destroy them. This is true. extensive and carefully planned operations for the purpose of ultimately bringing about the overthrow of the existing order in such nations. So it's all right here, what we all need to know. So the House debates trade with China, while trade is going on anyways, and will, even if this person wrote this down, extensive, faithfully, Clinton's, China's poster boy. So they ultimately bringing about the overthrow of the existing order in such nations, including the United States. And also our religious Christianity and decency has to be destroyed. These people are evil and they want to rule the world like the Hunger Games movie. What the politicians told the American citizens. All this Soviet building activity recorded in the Luce Committee and State Department files was carefully concealed from the American public. What the public was told can only be described as a pack of lies from beginning to end. Antony Sutton, smarter guy than me. To demonstrate the degree of falsehood, we reprint here a page on Russia from a document excerpt from a statement entitled Foreign Relations by the Honorable Frank Kellogg, Secretary of State, published by the Republican National Committee, Bulletin Number 5, 1928. In fact, at this very time, the United States, with implicit government approval, was involved in planning the first 5-year plan in Russia. The planning work was done actively by American firms. So the think tanks and firms in the United States were planning and plotting the growth and the success of the communist Russia. Construction of the Soviet dielectric arm continued throughout the 1930s up to World War II. So World War II was just another tool in this whole taking over the world. Even American young men were going off to war, being patriotic. Little did they know they were being deceived and following a plan that would lead towards their own children and children's children's destruction. In 1941, W.A. Harriman was appointed Lend-Lease administrator to assure the flow of United States technology and products to the Soviet Union in 1941. So they wouldn't have all their technologies now had we not supplied it to them. Israel would not have all those nukes threatening all of the world if we did not probably assist them in their espionage in getting those weapons. Maybe with China. But how can they bring about a World War III unless they arm everybody else, just like they did during World War II and World War I? There were conspiracies to arm and finance these forces to create the Hegelian dialectic, create one force to fight another force, while the controllers are in the background, the puppet masters, planning an end to all of us. The law required military goods only to be shipped. In fact, industrial equipment was in extraordinary amounts was also shipped, and Treasury Department currency plates so that the Soviets could freely print U.S. dollars. So they were sent their plates so they could create counterfeit money. Since World War II, the United States has kept the Soviets abreast of modern technology. So why would the people in our government be keeping the Soviets abreast of technology unless there was this New World Order plan? This story has been detailed elsewhere. In brief, the creation of the Soviet Union stems from the Skull and Bones, I'm sure many other Mystery School of Babylon organizations, Freemasons, Illuminati, Zionists, Jesuits, Rosicrucian, Bilderbergers, Bohemian Grove, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, Club of Rome, the Vatican, everywhere. All these secret witchcraft, Illuminati, Satanist organizations. But above all, this story has been concealed from the American public by politicians. More of this later. Now let's turn to the financing of the Nazi Party in Germany. I'm going to read this page here and end this video. Memorandum number 4, Antithesis, Financing the Nazis. The Marxist version of the Hegelian dialectic poses financial capitalism as thesis and Marxist revolution as antithesis. So they want to put the communist against the capitalist. We free people against the countries where the people are not free. Fight each other. An obvious puzzle is this in this Marxism statement is the nature of the synthesis presumed to evolve out of the clash of these opposites, i.e., the clash of financial capitalism and revolutionary Marxism. I'm also reminded of what the Secretary of the United Nations said, that global warming issue really wasn't about weather, it was about destroying capitalism. Think about it. If they go with this sustainability, environmental issues, global warming, all they'll do is shut businesses down, farms, and everything else. Everybody will be under their thumb. Nobody will be able to do anything. Too many rules, regulations. That's the plan. Lenin's statement that the state will wither away in the synthesis stage is nonsensical. So the leader of Russia, Lenin, said the state will wither away. In fact, as all contemporary Marxist states testify, the state in practice becomes all-powerful. The immediate task of the revolution is to convey all power to the state. And modern Marxist states operative under the constant paranoia that power may indeed pass away from the hands of the state into the hands of the people. So this is all a power struggle. They don't want we the people to have our power over our own selves. They want power. And as we've read in many of the books about the Jewish people, they think they are not all Jews, but they think they are the aristocrats of the world. They want titles, princes, dukes, and barons. They really have a mental condition to think that that's what they want to be recognized as. My opinion, from what I researched. We suggest that world forces may be seen differently, although still in the terms of the Hegelian dialectic. If Marxism, communism, is poised as the thesis, and National Socialism as the antithesis, then the most likely synthesis becomes a Hegelian New World Order, a synthesis evolving out of the clash of the Marxism and National Socialism. Moreover, in this statement, those who finance and manage the clash of opposites can remain in control of the synthesis. So even in 2008, when they crashed the stock market and gave themselves trillions because they were too big to fail, they needed that money to finance this whole New World Order program. If we can show that the order has artificially encouraged and developed both revolutionary Marxism and National Socialism while retaining some control over the nature and degree of the conflict, then it follows the order will be able to determine the evolution and nature of the New World Order. So they got this little document here, United States Group Control Council, Office of the Director of Intelligence, Field Information Agency Technical, Intelligence Report dated 1945, at the end of World War II. Fiat distribution, so that would be money. 3 statements prepared and signed by Thyssen in conjunction with his interrogations. Thyssen's relation with the Nazi Party. The second statement of the same subject. Thyssen's interview with Göring, 29 January 1941. Notes on the various subjects from stenographic transcripts of the interrogations. Real estate and personal records, financial resources, movements of the war, opinions at the outbreak of hostilities, examination of the Gestapo, personalities, financial support of the Nazi Party, defense of his support of the Nazi Party, the famous meeting of Dusseldorf, 1932, the book I Paid Hitler, opposition to the Nazi Party, resistance to the war, 1923, the Young Plan, the Hermann Göring work, Walter Schumann, Chief Economic and Financial Branch, United States. Just pointing out that Antony Sutton's a smarter guy than me. And I'm reading this stuff, this book. And where did the Nazis get their funds for the revolution? This is where we'll take off on the next video. So they were financing the Russians, and now we're going to read on page 166, they were financing the Germans, Nazis. The people here in New York, who later sent all the troops off to war, deceiving the American people. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.